As I said, we all have been given prevenient grace. And if we are seeking the truth, which we all should be seeking the truth, then more grace should be given. But instead, they're going after their own passions. They're seeking after their own pleasures and enjoyment. And when we see this kind of hedonistic lifestyle, what we are witnessing is God's grace withdrawn from such. They are just given over to the lusts and the passions and have no desire to seek after God. And this is a picture of humanity. Okay, this is what happens. Okay, if we fail to seek the truth and cooperate with the graces of God. It says in verses 20 of chapter 1, says, for the invisible things of him, right, from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, his eternal power also and divinity, so that they are inexcusable. So God gave all human beings this grace so that they know that there is a God, that they know God exists. They can see it. Okay, it says the invisible things of him, of God, are seen in the creation and the created world. Clearly seen, St. Paul says. And understood by the things that are made. So they're clearly seen, okay? They're clearly seen, they're clearly understood. These invisible qualities, these invisible attributes, are known instinctively to all human beings because of the grace of God given them by that prevenient grace. Right? And so he goes on to say, he says that they're inexcusable. These people who refuse to cooperate with the grace of God and reject the knowledge of God and fall into idolatry and all kinds of evil, they're without excuse, because if they cooperated with the grace of God, they would continue to, their minds and their reason would continue to know, would continue to come to the truth of who God is, because God is seen with them in that. So in verse 21 of chapter 1 of Romans, it says, because that when they knew God, how do they know God? By what's clearly seen. They knew that there's a God by what's clearly seen. His visible attributes are clearly seen and understood. It says, because that when they knew God, they have not glorified him as God or given thanks. Meaning they did not continue to cooperate and acknowledge that God that they could know in the creation, the God that they understood clearly to be seen, when they've cooperated with God's grace and their reason is clear, and their mind has not been darkened because of their refusal to cooperate with those graces, right? Instead, they chose not to give God glory by cooperating with the light of reason that they have, and instead, what did it say they do? It says, but instead became vain in their thoughts because they refused, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Okay, this is God giving them over. It says, for professing themselves to be wise, they became fools. So when they had a knowledge, they fell from that. It says, and they changed the glory of the incorruptible God into the likeness of the image of corruptible man and birds and so forth. And it says, wherefore God gave them up to the desires of their heart, right, to do all kind of wickedness. So here we see, this is the example of the pagan world around us, that they failed to cooperate with God's graces, and God gave them over to the lusts of their passions, which enslave them so that their reasoning is darkened, their mind is darkened, that they cannot see the truth. They failed to see the truth. They turned the truth into a lie. Well, St. Paul says this. He says, but when they knew God, they did not glorify him as God by a correspondence with the light he gave them, but continued in their idolatry. Therefore, God gave them up to the desires of their hearts. God delivered them up to shameful affliction and delivered them to a reprobate sense. That's what happens. We see this. So God, yes, God will remove his grace from you if we fail to cooperate. The pagan nations, the pagan world, the unbelieving world is an example of that. And we see it all around us today. Let me look at our society. How fallen it has gone, how far from reason it has gotten. I mean, just think about what is going on today and how we have no logical sense. I mean, do I have to spell it? It's so clear. We've lost any rational thinking of what's reality. I feel like we're living in Twilight Zone. But that's because God has given it over. And that's what's going to happen. This is a sign of it. All that we see today in our societies.